Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am happy to be here to talk movies with you today. And as you can see by the title of this episode, we are going to be talking about Ghostbusters. Pretty much all things Ghostbusters. I have mentioned before that I grew up watching the first Ghostbusters and the second, and so we're going to talk about Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters II, Ghostbusters III, Ghostbusters again. That's not the name of the movie, but there was another Ghostbusters, a second Ghostbusters, if you remember. And so that was actually talked about on this podcast 3 years ago by our hosts then, Jordan, Keith, and Mariano. But I thought that I would talk about it again since Ghostbusters 3 has been in the news a lot, and I've been talking about it, it seems like a lot, on various podcasts that I host. So we are going to start, as they say in The Sound of Music, at the beginning, the very beginning, not with our ABCs, but with the original Ghostbusters, which came out in 1984. And it is, I love the description on IMDb is super not terribly descriptive. It just says 3 former parapsychology professors set up shop as a unique ghost removal service. I mean, it's not inaccurate, but it's not terribly descriptive. So at any rate, it starts with Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray, who are 2 of those parapsychology professors, and they are kind of stuck in academia and performing some strange kind of experiments. One thing leads to another, and they get thrown out of the university. They're not believed. The university doesn't feel like they are in actual fields of science, so they decided to strike out on their own and open their own ghost busting agency, which is in an old firehouse, and they spend way too much money because Dan Aykroyd's character is very naive, and he's one of those really smart doctors who's not very smart in other ways, and in ways outside of his field. They team up with Harold Ramis, his character Egon. He is very, very smart and not as clueless as Dan Aykroyd's character, but a little clueless, especially when it comes to their office manager attempting to flirt with him. Their office manager is played by Annie Potts. I loved her in this role. Rick Moranis is also in it as, how to describe Rick Moranis? Well, he's an accountant. He is Sigourney Weaver's neighbor. Sigourney Weaver is important because she lives in what comes to be known as a very, very haunted building. So she ends up contacting the Ghostbusters to see if they can help her because she experiences some very strange things in her apartment. Dr. Venkman, that would be Bill Murray's character. He's kind of one of those smarmy 80s, hits on everything that moves, thinks he's all that kind of guys. And of course he hits on Sigourney Weaver and she ignores him, but then she eventually comes to kind of like him. Well, it's long and complicated, but whatever. So Rick Moranis is Sigourney Weaver's neighbor in this very haunted building, and he is one of those just like tries too hard kind of, like every time, no matter how much she tries to sneak past his door, he hears her and he comes out and he just has to talk all the time. And, you can tell that he's kind of nerdy and lonely, and he's sort of latched on to Sigourney Weaver's character. At any rate, that was a lot. This came out in 1986. The special effects were pretty good for the time. And and then I forgot to mention that there's a fourth Ghostbuster who comes in later. They hire him when they need some more help because of all the crazy paranormal activity that is going on in New York City. That is played by Ernie Hudson. He has some great one-liners. They all have some great one-liners. I mentioned this movie the other week when I was talking about movies that I watch with my dad, and the fact that my family and I can communicate completely in movie quotes. This is one of those movies that we can communicate in. I will not say some of those lines that we say because this is a family-friendly podcast, and some of them have some words that I can't say. It's not. There's no F-bomb in it, but I don't think there's an F-bomb in it. I don't remember there being any F-bombs, but, there's still language. And I cannot believe we must not have said those lines in front of my parents. Or maybe we just didn't say certain lines in front of my parents. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But Ernie Hudson has some great one-liners. They all really have some great one-liners. And if you have not seen the original, you need to. You can find it so many places. And I don't know. I would definitely recommend it. It is one of the movies that my husband likes to show on the side of the house on Halloween when we do that. He is such a big kid. He loves to give out the biggest size candy he can find, whether that's king size candy bars or movie theater size boxes of candy. And he decorates outside with, the table for the kids to come up to and get the candy. He puts the movie on the side of the house, and Ghostbusters is often one of those. As is Ghostbusters II. He did play that one year, and we got some very strange, confused looks from people who didn't know what it was. They did not realize that there had been a second Ghostbusters movie. Before I get to that one, I will say that I loved Ghostbusters growing up. Have seen it 8 million times. And when I first saw it, it came out in 1984, so I was 9 probably when I saw it. And I know we saw it in my mom's hometown when we were visiting my grandma. And I remember it gave me nightmares. Slimer gave me nightmares. I remember being upstairs in my grandma's house and waking up from a nightmare about Slimer. Yes, I was a very high-strung child, clearly, if I had nightmares about Slimer. But I got over that and watched it a bunch more times when it came out on VHS. Yep, that's how you had to do it then. And so loved it, watched it. Still watch it whenever I get the opportunity. Own it on DVD somewhere. If I still have DVDs somewhere, we've moved a bunch of times. They may or may not be in a box somewhere. At any rate, Ghostbusters 2, not as good as often happens with the sequel, but I don't know. I guess it wasn't horrible. It just really, I didn't like it as well. And like I said, that frequently happens with sequels. So that one came out in, let me double check the year, 1989. So 5 years later, still had the same cast with the addition of some new cast, of course. But the original Ghostbusters came back along with Sigourney Weaver as Dana Barrett. She and Bill Murray were no longer together. Dana had a baby, but Bill Murray was still Bill Murray. He was still Peter Venkman, and he tried all he could to rekindle that. Annie Potts is still in it. Rick Moranis is still in it. And the description of this one is the discovery of a massive river of ectoplasm and a resurgent of spectral activity allows the staff of Ghostbusters to revive the business. So they're not doing so well after they save New York in the first one. People, kind of tend to forget and go back to their non-ghost believing ways, and so they're struggling a little bit. But then this river of ectoplasm starts ramping up supernatural activity. There's this weird, creepy, possessed painting that begins to possess Peter MacNicol. This may be the first time I remember seeing Peter MacNicol in anything. He's been in a ton of stuff then. He is hilarious. And so there is this character, Vigo, who is the bad guy of this movie, and I don't quite know how to explain it except that he is in this this painting that's being restored by Peter MacNicol's character, and somehow manages to control Peter MacNicol's character to become his servant, his minion, his corporeal form in a way. And on that note, on the corporeal form, we are going to take our first break of the podcast. So when we come back, we'll continue talking about Ghostbusters 2. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC movie podcast, and I'll be right back.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. Keith keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC movie podcast. Before the break, I was talking about possession and corporeal forms and all kinds of creepy paintings, and saying that the sequel to Ghostbusters, which of course was Ghostbusters 2, was okay. It was not that great. One thing I forgot to mention in the first segment about the first movie was that it was nominated for 2 Oscars. It did not win any Oscars, but it was nominated. Second one actually was nominated for a couple of awards, but no Oscars. And it just not as good as the first. So a slightly longer explanation. 5 years after the events of the first film, the Ghostbusters have been plagued by lawsuits and court orders, and their once lucrative business is bankrupt. But when Dana has ghost problems again, the boys come out of retirement and are promptly arrested. The Ghostbusters discover that New York is once again headed for supernatural doom, with a river of ectoplasmic slime bubbling beneath the city, and an ancient sorcerer attempting to possess Dana's baby and be reborn. Can the Ghostbusters quell the negative emotions feeding the otherworldly threat and stop the world from being slimed? Well, that is the other thing. I mentioned that Dana has a baby in this movie who is played by twins, of course, as often happens. And oh my gosh, this was 1989, so those twins are 30 now. That is so wrong. No offense, twins. I'm sure you're lovely human beings, but you're 30 and I just always think of you as a baby. That I think was my favorite part of the movie, was the baby. Just, I love babies. I loved babies then. And the babies were pretty cute. The babies playing the baby. Very cute. Not as many great one-liners. I don't know that there's any. I can't think of any one-liners that I can remember quoting with my family. So that tells me something right there about this one. I have seen this one a couple of times, probably even a few times. I wouldn't say more than 3 or 4 times at most, though, because it's not one that I just turn on and, Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters, if I'm flipping through channels and it's on, I'll watch it from whatever point it's at. This one, not so much. Doesn't suck me in like that first one. At any rate, it did, let's see, $37 million at the box office, and it opened, as I said, in 1989, its budget was $37 million, excuse me. Its gross total was $112 million and some change. Cumulative worldwide gross, I cannot speak, was $215 million. So it did not recoup what it cost to make this movie, as opposed to the first one, which had a budget of $30 million, that's estimated, and it had a cumulative worldwide gross of $291 million. So it didn't quite hit its, I just lied. It totally hit its mark. I can't speak or do math today. So 30 million to make, 290 million worldwide gross. Let me look at those other numbers to make sure that I didn't just lie to you. And I did. 37 million to make for Ghostbusters 2, 215 million. That is way more than 37 million. So somebody just come and smack me because I do not know what I'm talking about. At any rate. There is some cameos in this one. Cheech Marin is a dock worker in the second one. If you never noticed that or don't remember it, and Slimer has a cameo, and Jason Reitman even has a role in the movie. Jason Reitman is the son of the director of that film, who was Ivan Reitman. He is now directing Ghostbusters 3, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. He is the kid who tells Ray that, according to his dad, the Ghostbusters are full of crap. That comes toward the beginning of the movie, and I did not know that was him. As well as, let's see, Catherine Reitman, who is... again, Ivan Reitman's daughter, plays the girl with the puppy in Egon's lab. And see, I don't even remember the girl with the puppy in Egon's lab. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. I don't even remember if I watched much of it. You know what? I did not even watch much of it the last time my husband played it on Halloween because I was at work. So I came home and just saw like the end of it that time. So it has been a long time since I saw this movie. And that's about all I can really... say. According to trivia on IMDb, Bill Murray told Entertainment Weekly that he was very disappointed with the way that the film turned out. He commented that those special effects guys took over. It was too much of the slime and not enough of us. I don't know. I just don't know if the script was that great. It was fun to see everyone back, but it was not so great, which then made me a little concerned with, the reboot and with the Ghostbusters that came out with the all-female cast. Before we talk about that, though, I want to know if you remember, if you're old enough to remember Ghostbusters originally, the fact that there was a Ghostbusters cartoon. Do you remember that one? It was called The Real Ghosbusters, and it was on from 1986 to 1991, so 5 seasons, and it was actually kind of fun. I remember watching it. None of the voices were played by the original actors, but there are some big names in the voiceover actors. Let's see, Frank Welker does a lot of voices. He's Freddy in Scooby-Doo. He is in a bunch of other things. He's a very proficient voice actor. Arsenio Hall was in seasons 1 through 3. Dave Coulier, you may know him from Full House, was in seasons 3 through 7. And so yeah, there was some big names in the cartoon. It was, as I said, it ran from 86 to 91. So it was between Ghostbusters 1 and Ghostbusters 2. Probably part of the reason that they decided to go with Ghostbusters 2. It's part of the reason that some of the things in Ghostbusters 2 are referenced, like Annie Potts' character was very different looking in the second movie than she was in the first, and that was because of the way her character looked in the cartoon. Slimer makes an appearance in Ghostbusters 2. As I said, he has a cameo, and that is because he is in Ghostbusters. Slimer, who gave me nightmares when I watched this the first time in whatever 4th grade. He was in this as kind of a sidekick, not in the containment unit, just kind of hanging out. Sometimes they'd send him into the containment unit to go commune with other ghosts or whatever he did. But yeah, he hung out. And at the start of the 4th season in 1988, the show was actually retitled to Slimer with an exclamation point. Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters, not just The Real Ghostbusters. It aired in a 1-hour time slot, which the show began doing under its original name earlier that same year on January 30th, 1988. In addition to the regular 30-minute Real Ghostbusters episode, a half-hour Slimer subseries was added that included 2 to 3 short animated segments focusing on the character Slimer. So Slimer wasn't, I don't know if maybe he was just misunderstood. He just wanted to eat hot dogs and slime people, but he was contained in the very very not so professional way as the Ghostbusters kind of first big case that actually got them anywhere after they opened the Ghostbusters. But now he was a regular character. He is shown to haunt the Sedgwick Hotel as its recurring pest. That's where they caught him in the first place. The segments added several characters as friends of Slimer and other supporting characters like a singing ice cream truck driver named Chili Cooper, an Italian pizza chef named Luigi, a restaurant owner named Raphael, who is Luigi's boss, a bellhop named Bud, hotel manager Morris Grout, socialite Mrs. Van Hugo, and her dog Fred, odd job worker Rudy. I remember some of this, but I don't really remember everything. There was 147 episodes of this, and I guess, if it started in 86 and ended in 91, and in 91 I was in high school, so maybe I wasn't watching. I'm sure I was still watching cartoons, but that's okay. I don't know if I was watching this cartoon particularly. So if you count the fact that Slimer then came on as kind of a separate half hour, there were 7 seasons, 4 of the Real Ghostbusters, and then 3 of Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters between 86 and 91. And as I said, 137 episodes. So I just thought I would bring that up in case you did not know that there was a Real Ghostbusters cartoon. And there are also, there also were 2 ongoing Real Ghostbusters comics, one published monthly by Now Comics in the United States, and the other published weekly, originally bi-weekly, by Marvel Comics in the United Kingdom. I did not know that. There was also a production of a line of action figures and play sets based on the cartoon, which I did know, but did not have any of those action figures. It's pretty interesting the way things go. So I actually would say I liked the cartoon better than I liked the sequel. And that's interesting to me that that I would like. I don't know, maybe it was just better or more fun or not as cheesy or something, even though it was very cheesy and very silly. And Slimer was kind of a lovable sidekick. At any rate, Ghostbusters II. The Real Ghostbusters, which was a cartoon. And on that note, we do need to take that second break of the podcast. I'm telling you, I can't count, can't do math, can't read. It might be time for me to go to bed. I don't even know what time it is. We'll be right back after this break. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC movie podcast, talking about all things Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 1, Ghostbusters 2, The Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon series, or Slimer and The Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon series, which brings us then to Ghostbusters again. We've come full circles now to Ghostbusters. This one came out in 2016. It was a reboot of sorts with an all-female cast. I know there was some definite backlash about that, and I remember being leery about not the all-female cast. I didn't really care about that, but just the reboot of a movie that I loved so much. And wasn't really sure. So this one has, let's talk about the plot of this one. That is, paranormal researcher Abby Yates and physicist Aaron Gilbert are trying to prove that ghosts exist in modern society. When strange apparitions appear in Manhattan, Gilbert and Yates turn to engineer Jillian Holtzman for help. Also joining the team is Patty Tolan, a lifelong New Yorker who knows the city inside and out. Armed with proton packs and plenty of attitude, the four women prepare for an epic battle as more than 1,000 mischievous ghouls descend on Times Square. So it is a reboot. They didn't just replace the four characters with women. I mean, they did, but it's not like they all had the same names and exact same sort of characters. There was some differences. Annie Potts' character, she was the office manager in the first two, was replaced by Chris Hemsworth. So they even switched genders that way. They had 4 female Ghostbusters and a male office manager. He was incredibly stupid. Pretty to look at, but incredibly stupid. So they also flipped that trope on its head a little bit. But let's see, the Ghostbusters, Kristen Wiig. Aaron Gilbert was played by Kristen Wiig. These are in order of appearance, not in order. Abby Yates was played by Melissa McCarthy. I know who's in it. I just can't remember their characters' names. Jillian Holtzman was played by Kate McKinnon. And where is she? Leslie Jones. There she is. Patty Tolan was played by Leslie Jones, who I knew a little bit from Saturday Night Live, but just she is hilarious. And I love Melissa McCarthy, except when I don't. Sometimes I just don't find her funny at all. Other times I find her hilarious, and she seems like she'd be a total hoot to hang out with, but I don't always enjoy all of her movies. Same thing for Kristen Wiig and Kate McKinnon. All three of those, I can either, like, they can have me laughing hysterically, or I can just be like, yeah, whatever, I'm over it. But they worked, and they worked well together in this movie, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And actually, my husband and I kind of knew that we were probably going to like it when my mom said she liked it. My mom does not like movies most of the time. I've mentioned this before. Every weekend when we talk to my parents, we ask, what movie is playing at the theater this weekend? And she tells us, and then we say, how is it? And she's like, eh. So if she has anything other than to say about a movie, we watch it. Really, she should do the podcast, and except that, 95% of the time it would be my mom saying, yeah, whatever, it wasn't that great. But you would know the 5% of the time when she says she likes a movie, get your rear end to a theater or get your rear end to Redbox or however you watch movies and get that movie. So if I had to rank now again, I had it as I actually had it in the order they came out: Ghostbusters, the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, and then Ghostbusters II. I'd put this one second. So Ghostbusters again, Ghostbusters the cartoon, and then Ghostbusters 2. That would be the order that I will put these in. Which brings us then to Ghostbusters 3, which has been announced. Jason Reitman is directing it, as I said. It is not a reboot. It is a continuation of the story. In some ways, all of the original characters have signed on to come back. They've read the script, but it's not about them. It is a different story. It is, but it's not known how those original characters will be coming back. Harold Ramis, of course, will not be coming back because he died several years ago. Ghostbusters without Egon makes me sad. Egon was one of my favorites. So dry and Egon-like. But, and I also don't know if Annie Potts will be back. Rick Moranis retired, from acting a long time ago, I believe after his wife died. So I really doubt that he will be in this because he has not come back to act in anything. So, but the original characters, Sigourney Weaver has said that she is coming back, and Jason Reitman is directing. Paul Rudd, as I mentioned, I can't remember if it was on this podcast or on another one, I apologize, is said to be in talks to play a teacher in the movie. So there is a 12-year-old girl and her parents, a 12-year-old boy. Oh my gosh. I know Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things is in it. I'm getting my details mixed up. At any rate, it is it's set in the same world. You know, the original Ghostbusters exist. We just don't know exactly how everything is going to fall into place. It is supposedly coming out sometime in 2020, and I am cautiously optimistic. I mean, I liked the reboot, and Jason Reitman has been quoted as crediting the director of the reboot with kind of opening up that door for this one to happen, you know, kind of getting a new generation to know the Ghostbusters, to enjoy the Ghostbusters. And so he, as I said, is the son of Ivan Reitman, the director of the original. And I am cautiously optimistic, as I said. Paul Rudd has announced that he's joining Ghostbusters. He apparently released a video on Entertainment Tonight, or there's a story on Entertainment Tonight, and I'm looking to see if there is, Untitled Ghostbusters coming out in 2020. So no title yet, not even a working title. Oh, maybe there's a working title. We just don't know what that is. And I like Paul Rudd. I'm excited that the original cast will be involved in some way, and I'm intrigued to see how everything comes together. So, Ghostbusters again, the Real Ghostbusters, that's the cartoon, Ghostbusters II. And then I'm cautiously optimistic about Ghostbusters 3. It's still at the end. You know what? I'm even going to put it ahead of Ghostbusters 2 right now. I'm cautiously optimistic that it's even going to be better than Ghostbusters 2. That was snarky. All right. On that note, we are going to wrap things up. But please join us next week because we have a special episode next week. We will be speaking with actor, writer, and producer Naomi McDougall-Jones. I say we because Tate is going to join me as a co-host of that episode. And we will be speaking with Naomi about her movie Bite Me. It is a movie about a real vampire and the IRS agent who audits her, which that is the craziest one-line elevator pitch I have ever heard. But that's what the movie is. Naomi plays the real vampire, and then there is an IRS agent who audits her, and there is craziness that ensues from there. But it is not only one of the best brief descriptions that I have heard in a long time, it's also a romantic comedy, which makes me really happy because I terribly miss romantic comedies. Hopefully they will make a comeback now. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I did, I guess last week when I did Always Be My Maybe, that I have missed romantic comedies, and I do hope that they are coming back. And if it is in the form of a very strange concept of a vampire, a real vampire, and the IRS agent who audits her, I'll take it. At any rate, please join us next week when we will be speaking to, as I said, Naomi McDougall-Jones about that movie and the tour they are currently doing to promote that movie. So thank you again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.